Okay, we're live. And if you are with us, you can join along in Slack. You can ask me some questions. Let me go ahead and put this stream link into the Slack. Well, just ate a bunch of chips. Terrible idea before a live stream. Okay. All right, we got a few people already joining. What's up? Week 2 of your sprint. Oh man, I am loving what you are producing and sharing in the Slack. If you haven't been in there, go take a look. It's in the My First Sprint channel, and I'm leaving comments for everyone. So go ahead and take a look at all of those. You'll learn from what I'm sharing with other people. This is great. And if you share, you get feedback. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to wait a few minutes to get started as people roll in. We're right at 7 o'clock. And if you need to ask any questions, you can ask them right here in the Slack community. Let's see. We're live. Week 2 live stream. Ta-da. Okay. All right. What's been happening? Lots of good Instagrams this week. Man, I love it. I love the doodles. What's so cool to me is that you can produce these doodles on your 8x11 paper, and you can communicate nothing more than that. And I already have a pretty good idea of like ways I can help you. You know, I'm already getting excited about what I'm seeing, and all you've done is do a little doodle. So I love that about this. We don't have to have a long conversation trying to find our words, which we're often pretty bad at. In fact, I love this expression from a good founder friend I know. That words are a terrible container for ideas. So something to take with you tonight about how do we communicate? How do we share ideas quickly and effectively when words are a poor container? All right, a few more minutes here. Let people roll in. I see some viewers. What kind of questions are you coming into tonight with? I think I've given everybody some good feedback on their How Might I's. Everyone who shared. It's okay if you don't want to share. You can get just as much feedback and advice by reading what I write for other people. Had a great call today with some folks from the community. Make sure you get your one-on-one call scheduled. It's right there for you. I'm excited. I want to geek out on some of the stuff that y'all are bringing to the surface here. I've got all kinds of fun ideas for you. That's the point of a good question. If you go to the How Might I section of your sprint course, I'll bring it up here. I've added some additional feedback, and I shared all this in Slack. I used Carol's example to walk you through kind of her whole process and to compare and contrast, because Carol asked a question about a How Might I that she wrote before she did the exercises, and it was great to see the contrasting structure of that question. Much stronger questions after we kind of come at our challenges from a strange place sometimes. All right, we got a few people going. I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. Week 1 is wrapped up. You should have created your How Might I and had some practice with that and gotten some feedback if you chose to share it on Slack. I know that can be a vulnerable experience, but already we're seeing a lot of shared ideas. Just remember that your question is not about solving for everything in your career at once. The whole purpose of doing these exercises like Curious or Instagram is we get a convergence and divergence experience that lets us focus in on something instead of not being sure where to start not being sure of what we want. That's okay. We don't know that. We're terrible at predicting what will make us happy, especially long term. The future is still being invented, so we're not going to have all the answers. You can't pros and cons these things. There's a lot of great behavioral economics research on how pros and cons lists are not very effective because we lack having all the information. So don't try to solve everything. We're going to get a focused question. And the point of this has always been to get into some momentum, to start to make something, to activate our seeking system so that we can self-express, that we can explore and experiment and do these things to get ourselves intrinsically motivated instead of getting stuck in the spiral of not sure what to figure out before I get started. That's not particularly helpful. There's a really great set of research on passion and figuring things out and planning and why it doesn't work. An academic at Georgetown University, Cal Newport, has written a book. This is years ago, maybe 2012, on why that doesn't particularly work, all supported by really great academic literature. So at any rate, How Might I's week 1, get those in. Let me take a look. I love helping you wordsmith those if needed. We're not going to overthink them because it's not about getting to the right one. In fact, I really loved Erica. She wrote 2. She did a great job with this. Wrote 2, which means you didn't have to feel married to one. How Might I? You didn't have to feel like you were going to be judged on it. And then she expressed it in a way that was oriented towards learning and discovery, which I really love about how she was able to craft that How Might I. Going out there, being open to possibilities instead of saying, here's the thing I want to do. It came up on my Instagram and I'll go do that. It's a sure thing. It's like, I'll offer that to the world. It was more like, what if I step back and I learned from what people needed? What were the biggest gaps out there? This is helpful context because not only are we shifting to a discovery mindset, but oftentimes in the prior mindset, we're looking for job openings. And instead of job openings, we want to look for jobs to be done. That's a much more powerful and helpful orientation for finding opportunities. So you might, excuse me, you might come out of your Instagram with like a specific idea of like, I could be a blank, right? And as you head in that direction, it doesn't mean that you'll actually be that. You're open to all the possible other things that haven't even been invented yet, by the way. Like future's still out there being formed as we speak. So you can't pick the right path. You can't predict it very well. And instead, as we get in the direction, we might find that we land somewhere in proximity because we see a gap, right? You may not be the chef, but you see an opportunity in the supply chain, or you see an opportunity in training. You see all these opportunities around the space that you could fill. And you're not going to necessarily land in some predestined or pre-engineered idea of what it is. So you stay open with that, learning and discovery. All that's great work. Let's go to week 2, the create step. So if you go into your sprint course, week 2, I've introduced a few of the lessons right now. I'm rolling these out a little bit slowly. I want to make sure everyone is confident moving into what comes next. Once you have your How Might I, what are you going to do to solve it? So I've introduced the introduction to the step 2, create step. And this is not what you're doing here with the sprints. It's not the only way to do this. You know, now that you have a question, there's lots of ways to solve for it. We want to orient how we solve for it around the structure of the second step. There are certain key elements to the create step. You can take your How Might I and go out into the world and get some advice, get some feedback. You're armed with it. It might inspire ideas around other things that you could create. Right now, I want to introduce to you the kind of keys that make that step really powerful. And then I'm going to introduce the loop that you're going to do, the create step that we will assign to you. And the reason for this is that we are often still held to conventional wisdom. When we come up with our own ideas initially, we haven't been practicing divergent ideas. We haven't been practicing creative solutions that may feel weird, or that we may be judged for, or that maybe we don't think are going to work. And they might not work. Remember, it's a how might I. We're open to things that might not work. But if we're going to get out there and try things that are different, that are going to be more powerful in supporting our progress, then we need to look outside of the conventional. So we're going to share an example for you, assign it for you to get started. You might also iterate on it, and I'll have lots of ideas about what additional loops you could make, because this is just a starter. So the create step, what makes a good one? Pull up my sprint course here. You can follow along. Step 2, you're swinging into the loop now, right? Before you're just kind of like, what's happening out there? And now we're going to make a project. We have a good question. Let's create something. This is the step where you generate ideas for small projects as a way to address your question. You want to push beyond the obvious answers and come bearing gifts. Come bearing gifts means that when we make stuff, we want to share it with the world. It's not just that we're creating in a vacuum for ourselves and we will never, meet and interact with other humans. We want to do things in a way that is not entirely selfish, that we are working on something for ourselves, solving our challenge, but in a way that comes and brings gifts to the world. And we're going to show you what that means through this first assigned loop. So a good create step. What makes a good creation? It first produces an artifact. It shows that something was made and that something can continue to live in the world. The artifact will remain from what you created. So if you go and get coffee with people, that's fine advice. It's very conventional and oftentimes hard to do, very slow, and a challenging request for people. But if you go do that, you are not producing an artifact. So first thing is you want to make an artifact that lives beyond this moment, lives beyond the loop. Second thing is you want to push your comfort zone. And that can be very challenging, very scary, but it's also very rewarding. And I'll give you a story about that in a moment. The second thing, or the third thing, is a provider of external propulsion. These are PEPs. So your create step needs to create a PEP. A PEP is a form of, oftentimes takes a form of commitment, like a public commitment. What is the thing externally from yourself, outside of your own willpower, that is going to propel you? It's going to force you to finish this thing, force you to live up to your commitment and finish what you started. PEPs. The fourth thing, really just have fun. So don't do something that's overwhelming. Don't do something that feels like work. This is seeking systems, explorative, self-expressive. Do it because it's fun. I'll put all four of these in action with some examples. So the first one, if you're following along in the course, is the scavenger hunt. So we'll open with the clarify step. How might I explore UX opportunities while amplifying my skill building? This question, this loop, came from someone who, a user here with the sprints, was asking himself this question, making a career transition, learning a new skill, closing that gap. Wasn't sure about what opportunities might be out there. Another gap, awareness. So they're like, how might I do all this? And he created this own loop. His answer in the create step was to craft a scavenger hunt. And this scavenger hunt was a list of things that he created, 10 things that he could pick from each week and go hunt for. And this included things like finding a new publication on user experience and reading an article and summarizing the key points, or sending that article to someone else he thought it might be useful to. So he had to find the new thing. He couldn't just keep reading the same publication. It included things like giving props around tools that he's learning to use. So he goes and finds the author of those tools and gives a shout out to them and how he used it. He had ways of observing experiences in his life throughout the day, which tuned his brain to the user experience practice. And then he was offering different ideas on how he might change those and improve them. So he has this whole list here he creates for himself, and he publishes that he's doing this. He creates these artifacts, and very quickly, people start applauding it. He's like, hey, look at this, Spencer. Like, people love what I'm doing. How crazy is it that they think this kind of dumb game that I created for myself is actually really fun? And not only that, but because he's creating the artifact, he's telling people how he's doing it, and he's connecting by asking for help to go hunting, giving props in his industry as he's using these tools, and he's publishing his results. Because he's connecting this project to the world, people are showing up and offering help, and more so, people are showing up and they want to do it with him. They want to do the scavenger hunt for their own UX skills. They're finding it to be a fun game. So it's hitting all these key points around what makes a great create step. So that's one example. Another one is around students. Often they ask this question, how do I decide between going to a startup or joining a big company after graduation? Really common question in our previous company, which is a college career accelerator. And the way they started solving this was to go visit those companies. They did a loop called Road Trip. And at the time, there's no design for this. There was no permission for this. The school wasn't organizing it for them. They just said, well, are there other friends who might like this? And there was. And then they said, well, what about where will we go? How will we get in there? Oh, we have alumni. We call alumni. We organize these trips. So they start building these things. Right now, year after year, this has become an institutional thing. And they take hundreds of students to New York and DC and Richmond and Austin now. And they meet with these companies. They show up at the door. And these are our students, but I'm willing to bet if you did this as a professional, non-student, you could find a version of this Road Trip that you could do yourself. And the whole premise of this comes from the book Road Trip Nation, where a few recent college graduates, this was, 15 years ago maybe, they got in an RV and just started off on the interviews, driving across the country, talking to these business owners and trying to answer like what are their career paths like. And they were not surprisingly quite loopy. And they just got all this great advice and feedback and discovery. And it was a really wild trip. And it's now become this whole media production, a media outlet, Road Trip Nation. So they continue producing these today. At any rate, that's sort of a creative example of how to use your create step, scavenger hunt, road trips. It's much more bold. It's much more unconventional. It's not brain picking over coffee. So lots of ways you could take this. Both of those are very awareness gap oriented examples. Let's go into the next part. What will you be creating? What is your create step? This is what we are assigning to you. Now, already, from what I'm seeing in Slack, what you were creating last week, already I am seeing other potential loops for you. We'll get to those at the end. I'll help you orient towards them. They may not still be the right next step for you after you finish this create your first loop, your first sprint. We're doing this one so you get to practice. We're doing this one so you can expand your network. We're doing this one so that you get to experience something that is unconventional in how to go seek advice and probably pushes your comfort zone a little bit. So the cheat sheet. Now that you're onto the good question, we're going to go seek advice from people. And we're going to do that in a way that overcomes the typical coffee brain picking scenario. That's very conventional wisdom. That wisdom fails the 2-question test. How do I make it clear and easy for this person to help me? And how do I add value to this exchange? That's a big one that we often miss. What are you doing to help create value here? People that you want to pick their brains on or get advice from, they're often pretty busy. They don't have time to throw an hour at every coffee just to figure out why you're there. Come at them with a clear question. We've been working on that already. And come at them in a way that adds value. So oftentimes, for me, I get a lot of questions. I give you an example here in the course. I get a lot of questions about social impact careers, and so I answer this a lot. And so I was running a workshop, and I was like, let's go get advice from a lot of other experts, people with much more experience than me. And so I composed this create step, this loop called the cheat sheet. In the cheat sheet, you create a survey asking one question, your question, the how might I? In this case, for me, the question was, how might I get advice from industry leaders about making career transitions into social impact? And do this in a way that adds value to them. Okay, so I went to them and I asked that one question. What is your number one absolute only piece of advice that you would give, that you have to share now, to someone who's asking this question, who wants to make a transition? What do they do? You get one answer. Okay, that's easy enough to answer. It's easy enough to fill out. We can complete it in an email, right? Only this time, I'm going to take all your answers and I'm going to compile them into one sheet, one cheat sheet, one PDF. And that's exactly what I did. So then I could share it with my workshop, and I could show them, go ask the same question, build your own cheat sheet, add to this. Okay. The other thing that happened is once you complete this, you can go share it to them. You can thank them. And because you've created an artifact, it lives beyond this loop. You can go at any other time when you meet people, you say, I've got this great thing. You're looking for a way to help me. Add to the cheat sheet, be a part of this cheat sheet. When you create something like this and you go to ask for help, it's much easier to ask advice of people you don't know and who don't know you when you have an interesting project that you're creating behind it, when you have something compelling, as opposed to, I'm going to help this one person and then that advice is going to be lost to everybody else until I have to answer this question again. And that is exhausting and time consuming. So we take our cheat sheet, we go out there, we start to get these answers, people are completing it, and then I follow up with them. How can you connect me to even more people? So I'm expanding my network, okay? I'm doing this in a way that isn't asking a lot of people. It's adding value to them, in a small way. It's celebrating what they know. And at the end, I produce this, and then I share it. I share it with them. I thank them. I put it on my network. I can share it on LinkedIn. Look what I did. Look what I made. Who wants to add more to it? And it can grow from there. And we're talking about a week. We do this in a week. You've got a little bit longer than that. And you get amazing insights. So one of the cool things that happens is, you get typically very practical and like actionable advice, because these are folks who are like, look, let me tell you to you straight. Like, there's the rah, motivational thing that you can say. And then there's this part where people get down to they get down to business. Here's what you should really do. You don't necessarily want to hear this part because it takes hard work. It's going to take, putting yourself out there. This is what you got to do. And in the advice, we were able to get some really cool insights. So one of them in this example was from one of our CEOs that we talked to. They said that on the boards, and she serves on these nonprofit boards, they're looking for millennials or young people, Gen Z even. They're looking for people who represent an audience that is not represented by the board. Boards are typically of aged experience. When they're formed, they have a formal role there so they can be advisors. They have certain perceptions and audiences and even biases that come into their position. They need other perspectives. If you are able to simply leverage that you have the different perspective on your audience, that's something that could get you a seat at the table. And you would not otherwise have considered that you were eligible for that until we heard this from someone saying, if you're a millennial, you should position yourself on a board. It can be done. So our next step, poof, we've built this loop, we get this advice, we share it, we got this artifact, we've learned this insight. We can form a new loop based on how might I identify a nonprofit and position myself to be on that board. That's a new challenge. Already come up with some ideas, right? So there's some really good new momentum that you can carry out of what you learned. There's another one here in the sprint course on design thinking. One of the members of the Best Monday Ever teams here helping you, and is in Slack, and he also runs a design thinking community and wanted to do the same thing. How do I share this advice? Got all these people that want to know more about more of these careers, and so he did the same thing. And he this thing just has enormous contributions. He has like over 20 people and hundreds of likes on when he shared it on LinkedIn. People just thought this was the coolest idea. Look at all that! What a great way to get and collect advice, and he did such a great job with it. And so, it's a simple activity that's much more resourceful. It creates much more resources, more insights from more people faster. Now you've created a connection with these folks, with all the contributors. You can turn around and go back to them with a new question, a new ask, something else to contribute to what you're making. Okay, that's a great authentic connection. You haven't really asked them to go out of their way for you. You're building a relationship with new people. So that is the create step. A few examples there. There's one, Steve in the community here has got some really cool ideas around his experience, and had on his Instagram maybe doing a TED talk. And I've seen some other folks in there about writing a book. And this applies to Steve equally. So here's an example of going into your create step and really pushing your comfort zone. Public speaking is typically a big comfort zone pusher. So we have a loop called Welcome to the Stage. It's oftentimes a good one to precede doing something as big as a book. A book is not a loop. A book is a very big project. Books are what we smallify them. You might actually end up writing a book, or you might not write a book at all because you discover there's something else better for you to do, a different type of vehicle for you to express your ideas. So we do one called Welcome to the Stage. This is when you want to express an idea, a point of view, something that you can share. It's a vehicle for sharing those ideas. And I do this one a lot. I like this one. I like public speaking. But I signed up for one. I was accepted to one early last year. And in this one, it was not the format that I am most comfortable with. I tend to be a little more improvish. I tend to respond and give and take from the audience, and I know my narrative. So in this talk, I was given a brand new narrative, one I had not given before, and I was giving it to an audience I'd never spoken to, and the slides were on a timer. So it's very Pechakucha style. Whew. So I've spoken for hundreds of people in big events, and comfortable. Know my narrative, know my audience. I can ad lib. This was the most nerve-wracking, comfort-pushing thing that I did all year. And in fact, the week of the event, I did not want to do it. I absolutely did not want to do it. And I probably wouldn't have if it had not been for the PEP, for the provider of external propulsion. I had been accepted to this thing. There was reputation now on it, which did create a lot of pressure, right? You got to get there and actually do this well. And I didn't want to let the people down. I did not want to let them down. So, if it had been an easy out, I would have been out. I would not have done it. But my PEP kept me in there, kept me into pushing my comfort zone in a big way, and I pulled it off. I did. It with all the nerves and everything. I didn't really want to do it, and I met the most amazing people. Other speakers. and from the audience. I love the event. I learned more about how to craft the message I was going after. I learned what worked, what didn't. I made some really great connections, one of which resulted in a new advisor, one of which resulted in a client. So it all worked out very well. But boy, I did not want to do it because I created PEPs. I committed to something, and I had pushed my comfort zone in that way. Man, I got to great new outcomes. So that is showing you how, public speaking is not a novel thing, but how you can use those things to propel your loop forward, to propel you into new insights, to new unexpected outcomes, because that's what happens when we share what we create. Making things matters most is the foundation of the create step. So with that in mind, we're right at 30 minutes. I'll probably make this one a little bit shorter today. I'm looking for any questions you have about these. I'll share this in the Slack, this video. They're recorded just as we did last week. And I will release all the steps for this cheat sheet. Making the transition from your how might I to this cheat sheet isn't always one-to-one. You'll have to formulate your question a little bit. I got a question coming in from Casey. Look at him. He's got a photograph of his computer. One of a couple. What's up, Casey? What you doing? What's your question? So I will release your steps, or I'll send the steps to you. A lot of us have calls this week, and we will we'll go over marrying your how might I to the cheat sheet. And I'll likely be sharing a lot of other additional types of loops and things that you could be doing against your question. Again, very simple. It's a very simple approach, but it can be very powerful. All right, look at Casey's just got. Look at this. This guy has got the mega printouts. Look, I think you might be the only person who printed these out. Casey with the printouts. I love it. Look at this. Oh my gosh. He's got them all ready at his desk. He's headsetted. And he's got the call cut out on Radness ranking. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to give him some feedback. In fact, Casey, I think we might be talking tomorrow, maybe. I don't know, but I'm pumped. I love what you all are doing. Any other thoughts, questions? Oh man, look at the dude's multicolor. I like it. That's the first so far. Good. Also, good shout outs this week to folks with their photos and their Radness rankings. I think it was Steve he had his little images on the Radness ranking, a little squirrel with a bug nuts pile. He had a little frog with glasses. I mean, you guys are having fun with it. I really appreciate that. Oh man, it's rolling in now. Casey is doing it. Yep. Okay, I got my work cut out for me tonight. That's it for everyone. Again, we'll have calls. If you don't feel overwhelmed by this, we'll help you get married to what you need to do. All right. Any other thoughts? Any questions? I'll be in Slack. What we love about Slack is it's asynchronous, right? So we're in different time zones. You can leave your question. You might maybe you're a night owl, and I'll answer it in the morning. And what I like doing is when I can, collecting a bunch of different pieces of input and feedback, and then producing a little video for you. Casey with the photos, man, just keep them coming. All right, y'all. I will talk to you next week.